Hello and welcome to the Toolkit for Traders YouTube channel, where we give you the tools for trading success. And in today's episode, we're on to the seventh episode of our MQL5 programming tutorial. So let's get started. So today we're looking at loops and lists. So what are loops? What are loops? What are loops? It's a bad joke, but you get the point. We're going to look at loops, what they are. And in order to look at loops properly, we need to get some background on how we use lists in our MQL5 code. Now, lists in programming speak are referred to as arrays. So we'll talk a bit about that, how arrays are, how we can work with them. And then we'll look at how we can manipulate our lists to get and store information that we can display for our EA. So, quote for today: perseverance is the hard work you do after you get tired of doing the hard work you already did. So, at this point in the course, you might find yourself flagging a bit. You've done lots of hard work to get to this point, and perseverance is about pushing through this stage and keeping going, and then getting the reward at the end of it. Today's episode will be more heavy than previous episodes in terms of technically challenging, but I will try and break it down as best as I can, and hopefully you'll be able to follow along. And if you persevere, this kind of stuff will become second nature to you in the future. So do persevere with it. Watch multiple times if you need to. And if you like this video, please put a like on there. Subscribe to the channel if you've not already. It's really encouraging to me when people like the video. I do check it. Too much probably. So really nice to do that. And if you have any questions or any comments, put them in the comment section. I'm really active now on the comments, so put your questions, your comments there. Even if you just want to say what you think of the lesson, was it good, was it bad, what didn't you get, put a comment down there and I'll try and get back to you. So what are loops? So loops allow us to repeatedly execute the same section of code as many times as we want, potentially infinitely. You usually don't want that to be, because that's when your computer will crash. It will run through the code again and again and again and never stop and take up your CPU's processing power, and you can't really do anything else. But we could do that, but often we want to have a loop that runs for a finite amount of time. There are three kinds of loops in MQL5. We have the while loop, a do-while loop, which is similar to the while loop, but with a variation in the order that we do things, and a for loop, which we use quite a lot. We'll cover the while and the for loop today. We won't cover the do-while. You don't need it. And if you really want to use it, you can look at the documentation for that. But the main kinds of loops that you will use will be the while and for, and you can achieve pretty much anything you want to with those loops. So we'll look at the while loop first. A while loop, we'll look at an example of the code for a rocket countdown. So we're starting with, we've created an integer variable. So we set the type, we've called it our countdown timer, and we've set the initial value to be 10. This is covered in creating variables is covered in a previous lesson if you've not got that far already. So do watch that if this doesn't make any sense to you. So we then use the keyword while to start our loop, and we open the brackets and we put in here an expression that we want to run the code for. So what do I mean by that? So the while loop will execute this code repeatedly as long as this statement here evaluates as true. So as long as countdown timer is above 0, this code is going to execute. So the first thing we've done in our script here is and it's the really important step, is we've reduced our countdown timer by 1. So we've set our countdown timer to the current value minus 1. And that means that on the first loop, this will equal 9. Then it will run through the second loop, it will equal 8, and so on and so on. And eventually this will equal 0, at which point this expression will be false. and therefore the code will no longer run in this section and will go on to the rest of the code that we have down here. We have here a print statement, which we've used before, or a comment statement, whatever. And we can say lift off in, and then we use the number there. So that will give us a countdown timer that's printed out from 10 through to 1, and then it will stop. And then we've also used a function here to sleep, so that we wait 1 second, as it's in milliseconds, 1,000 milliseconds between each while loop. So this will take 10 seconds to run, and we'll have a countdown timer. And we add on here, if the countdown timer equals 0, we can print blast off. Okay, so the code in this section is going to run and run and run until it equals 0, and then it will come out of these curly brackets and run the next section of code, which we're checking if it does equal 0, which it should, and then we're going to print there. And you can see I've used a single line if statement. So if you can do this if the code that you're going to do within an if section is just one single line. You don't need the curly brackets. You can put it on the same line with the code like that. It just makes your code a bit more concise sometimes. But that essentially would have the same effect as having curly brackets with print blast off in between those. One other thing that we can do is, instead of writing countdown timer in this way with the -1, countdown timer -1, we can be a bit more concise, and we can use a special type of operator with a minus equals. And what that basically means, we're telling the compiler that we want this countdown timer to equal the same but less than, with a less than 1, and it will do that itself. It understands what that means. And you can use any number after here, so you could do the countdown timer -5 or -10. Obviously it wouldn't be helpful for this scenario, but then you can use that for a nice concise way to do minus the number from there. You can also use another type of operator, which is common in many programming languages, and we just use a double minus after the value, and that is going to reduce the countdown timer by 1. We can't change the number in this case, but it's a really useful shorthand to say, I want to take that countdown timer, I want to take 1 off it, and then we'll go through there and have the exact same effect. So we can do the same thing with a for loop, and a for loop is slightly different. So we start with our keyword for, we open up our brackets as we did before. We're going to initialize the variable inside the loop. So we've said what type we want, what we want to call it, and what the initial value is going to be. In this case, obviously 10. We're then we have a second expression, which is whether we're evaluating whether it's true or false. So in this case, is the countdown timer above 0? And then we're saying what we want to do at the end of each for loop with this value. So we're saying that we want to reduce the countdown timer by 1, and then we'll go through it. So eventually, after we've run this a number of times, we will break from the for loop. So the code here, we actually don't need this line. So excuse me for that. You don't need this line here. You would actually get that double time because we're already doing it in here. We can print lift off in, and then we have the sleep condition again, and then we have the if statement for the blast off. So hopefully that makes a bit more sense. We'll look at that in MetaEditor in a moment, but first we need to cover what lists are in coding, as in what are arrays. So if you have lots of variables of the same type, it can be useful to save them in a list. An array in computer science speak. So an array is just a list. The reason it's called an array is because it can be multi-dimensional. So if you think about a shopping list, you've just got one axis, Y, going down the page with all your groceries on. It's a one-dimensional because it's just going down. Now, an array can have multi-dimensions, so it can be two-dimensional. So you could have your shopping list for different days of the week, with going down for the groceries, going across for the different days of the week. That would be a two-dimensional array, and you can have more. So that's an array, and that's why we call it array. So what we would know as a list is just a single dimensional array. So looking at how we might construct our shopping list in an array, we, again, like we do with a variable, we say the type, which in this case is string. We give our list a name, as we do with a variable, so shopping list. And then we use the square brackets after that to say that this is not a variable, this is in fact an array. So we need the square brackets to tell the compiler this is an array that we're making. We've also put in here the size of the array. You have to tell the compiler how big, how much, essentially you have to tell it how much space on the hard drive or on your RAM that you need to save for this array. So then we've created the array, the list, and then we can populate. So we use the curly brackets with equals, curly brackets, and then we've got a list here separated by commas of our shopping list. So we declare, just to recap, we declare the variable type, we name the list, and we put the values in between the curly brackets separated by a comma. So in order to get the value out of the shopping list, we can, imagine we use a function print, remember to buy, and then we want to get the item out. So the way we do that is we refer back to the array with the name, we use the square brackets, and then we say which value of here we would like to print. Now in this case, we're saying 0. Now you might say 0, that's, well, which one is that? So in MQL5 and most common programming languages, we index from 0. So, if you were to count down your shopping list on a piece of paper, you would normally start with number 1, eggs, number 2, cheese, number 3, bread, which makes sense to most of us. But in programming, we start from the 0 index, and that's common to most languages. So in this case, we start 0, which means the first one, so this one here, would be, the shopping list here, 0 would refer to eggs here, and it would print out, remember to buy eggs. Now, if we were to change that to 4, now you might be tempted to go 1, 2, 3, 4 and think it's going to print orange juice, but actually remember that we started at 0, so we're going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's going to print out apples. So just something you have to get used to. It's a little bit counterintuitive when you start, but you just need to remember that we start our arrays with the 0 index. So just to demonstrate that, each number here, where it is in the list, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now remember, we said that the list is 5 long, and we have 0 to 4 in there. So that's an important difference that you need to remember sometimes when you're using loops like while and for, because you don't want to try and refer to the number 5. If you were to put 5 in here, you would get an error because it would be trying to find some kind of value over here that doesn't exist. So it's important to remember that there's a difference between the length and the last number or the last index in the list not being the same as the length. So let's go to MetaEditor now. We've whizzed through that. Let's go to MetaEditor and we'll look at how we can implement a list, an array, and also a for and a while loop to add some more useful information to our expert advisor. So we're back in the MetaEditor application and we're going to look at adding some more functionality to our expert advisor that we've been working on in the previous lessons. So in this lesson, we're going to add some more information onto our chart that we might find useful in trading. I know we still haven't gotten to opening and closing trades, but this is all about building up your coding knowledge so that when we get to that stage, you understand what we're doing. I'd hate to start, throwing together indicators and making an expert advisor and it just not making a lot of sense because you don't understand the basics. So do follow along in these ones. Do create this expert advisor, even though it's not that useful, because it will help you to build a foundational knowledge on how to use MQL5 to build your expert advisors in the future. So persevere, as we said at the start. Right, so we're going to save this as a new one. So we've saved our progress. We'll call this lesson 7. So now we've got this as lesson 7. And what we want to do is we're going to look at adding some volume information onto our chart. So in the last episode, we looked at spread, and we have a little comment in the top left corner of our chart, which shows us the spread. And in this lesson, we're going to add some volume to that. So the first thing we're going to do, excuse me, is we're going to create an array, and we're going to create it of a long type. Now, we didn't cover long in the variable types. It was one of the ones we didn't cover because it's not a usual one, but we do have to use long in this type. Now, a long is like an integer, except it must be a positive integer. It cannot be a negative number. So it's exactly the same as an int, but it has to be a positive number. It can't be a minus. Now, why are we using the long? Well, in a moment, we're going to populate this array with volume information, and when we retrieve volume information from the MetaTrader platform, it will come back to us from that function as a long type. So we'll look at that in a moment, but it's important that we match the data type that we're using to the type that's going to be returned from that function. So just bear with it a moment. Hopefully that will come clear in a second. So we're going to call this the last 5 volumes. So we're going to get the last 5 volumes from the chart, we set the type as long. We give it the name last 5 volumes. We use a square brackets to say it's an array and not a variable, because if we were to do that, this would be a variable with a single piece of data in there. We use a square brackets. You could leave it like that, but this we need a size. So we could actually give it some blank values, some 5 numbers, and this would work because it would be able to infer from the numbers we put in there that this one is 5 long. But what we want to do here is we want to be explicit with this. We don't want to have any unexpected errors. So we are going to say, no, we want the last 5. We want this array to be 5, just so that we don't have any errors. So we could let the compiler work out that this is 5 long because we've declared it. But in this instance, we want to be explicit because we know how long our array is going to be, so we can say that and we can avoid ourselves a headache in the future. So we've now created our very first array, so we need to now do something with it. So we have our check spread, so we're just going to add some comments in here. So we're going to say this is check the spread, and then we're going to have a new section here, and what we're going to do is we're going to populate our array with the last 5 volumes on the chart. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to use a for loop to fill this array here, which has got zeros. We're going to use a for loop to put our information into there. So we type for, and we declare our type as int, and we're going to use it doesn't matter what letter you use, but commonly in maths you use I and J, X and Y. So we'll use I in this case because we're talking about an index within our list. So we create a variable which we're going to use as our index to go through our list. We use a semicolon to separate the expressions, and we're going to say that we want to do this for as long as the index is less than the size of the array. So how do we know the size of the array? Well, we can use a built-in function here, which is going to return an int, and so we just need to tell it which array we're looking at. So we can put in here the last 5 volumes, and it's going to return the number 5. So as long as I is less than 5, this for loop will run. And the last thing we need to do is we need to make sure that I increases at every run of this code. So we can close those brackets, open up some new curly brackets, and then we can populate this. So we can get our last 5 volumes, and we want to populate it with the volume from the most recent bar back to the 5th most recent bar, if that makes sense. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to use this I. So on the first run, this I will be 0, and 0 in terms of the function will be the most recent piece of information, as in the current bar that's being going up and down and changing size. And then on the second one, this will be 1, and it will look at the previous bar, and so on and so on. So we're going to set the value of the number within the array to be a volume number. So how do we get the volume number? We're going to use an inbuilt function called iVolume. So iVolume, if we press F1, we can bring up the documentation, and it returns the tick volume of the bar indicated by the shift parameter. So it's going to return a long number. So this is why we had to use the long. We need to input the symbol that we're going to use. We need to input the time frame we want, and then we need to know the shift. Now the shift is how many bars back do we want to pick that information from. So as we say, we want the last 5. So we're going to put in our symbol. We're going to say the current period, and we want the shift to be I. So when this is in the first run, we'll get the most recent volume, and then we'll, on the second run of this code within the for loop, we'll get the previous bar, and then the previous bar, and so on. So we'll populate the last 5 volumes like that. And just to show what we mean by that, we're going to use a function called array print here, and we're going to print the last 5 volumes. So we'll have a go with that, and let's just compile that. Do we get any errors? No. So go to the MetaTrader now, and we'll load up that expert advisor we are working on, and we'll see what we've got so far. So if we look here, if you look down at the bottom, you can see the different tabs. We've used the comment function before, and this time we've used a print array function. Now when we use print, it comes into this experts tab at the bottom. So you can see here we're printing 5 different numbers. Obviously these numbers aren't random. These are the tick volume numbers, which I don't have on my chart. So if we right click, we go to tick volumes, you can see we've got the tick volumes down there, and you'll see the first number is 1703. And then we have a higher number, 5120, 3168, 2067, and 5710. So we're just taking these numbers. So our I is 0 in the first loop of the for. We're pulling that information, putting it into our array. Then when it's 1, we're pulling this information. Then when it's 2, we're pulling this information. Then when it's 3, we're pulling this information, etc. Until we get to 4. We pull the last one, and then the I is 5, but that is the same length as the array, and we used a less than, so that one is not going to pull, hence why we fill this out without any errors. So we're looking good so far. So we'll go back to the MetaEditor now, and we'll put that information. We're going to use a while loop now to put that information on the chart rather than in the experts tab. So we're going to put another comment section to explain to ourselves what we're going to do. So we're going to comment the list of the last 5 volumes on the chart. So what we're going to do is we have up here our comment message. So we're going to take that comment and we're going to move it to the bottom, because we don't want to do it there. We want to do it a bit later on, once we've filled it up with all the information we want. So we're still going to have the spread information. We're now just going to add some more information. So what we want to do is we want to have a volume message now. So we're going to create a volume message string variable. We're going to create a placeholder variable for our while loop. So we're going to do int j, and I'm only using that because we've already used I here. So we just use j here so we don't get any errors of these mixing up. So we create a j variable that's going to start at 0, and we're going to say while, open the brackets, and we need to put our single expression in for this. So while j is less than the array size, so similar to what we did before. So while j is less than that of the last 5 volumes, we're going to execute the code between these curly brackets. So what we do need to do, we want to add some information to our volume message first of all. So we can use an inbuilt function here called string add. And what this does is this is going to add to a string that we already have. Now we've created a volume message string up here, so we're going to add to that one. And we're going to say this is the string variable we want to add to, and then we want to use the last 5 volumes. So if we type in here the last 5 volumes, that would be the whole array, so that wouldn't work. So we need to say which one, and we're going to use j as our index. Now, if we were to do that, and we could compile that, let's try that. So we get this warning here, which says an implicit conversion of number to string. So in here, last 5 volumes j, that will pull out a long number. But this is a string, so it's giving us a warning. So the way we get around that is we can say integer to string. We can use that function, which is inbuilt. We have our long value from our last 5 volumes, and we can use that. So now we have it as a string, converted to a string. We're good. So we are missing a semicolon somewhere. Now we also, we're missing a semicolon. Let's have a look. Unexpected token, where's that? I think we needed brackets. So let's try that. Good. And we also need to make sure that we iterate up our j variable, because if we left that without this section here, then if we left that without this section here, then j would always stay at 0, and this while loop would go on forever. And actually what you would end up with is an array out of range, because j would go, no, you wouldn't. It would just keep going, because j would always be 0, and you would just keep printing the 0 number in there. So we need to make sure we add 1 to our j. Otherwise, we will be stuck in an infinite loop forever. So we now we're going to do something else as well. And we're just going to, because if we do this now, all the numbers will be together. So we want to separate those numbers out a bit. So we could do that with a new line. We've used a new line character constant before, but we're going to do another string add, and we're going to go to our volume message. So in the past, we've used a new line variable like that. If we change this to t, put a space by it, this will put in a tab, which will separate those numbers for us. So now we're using our while loop. We're doing it until j is bigger than the length of the last 5 volumes array. We're going to add to the volume message a number from the last 5 volumes. At which number we're adding is the one at the index j, which is increasing by 1 every time we do this. And then we're adding a tab between those messages so that it's more readable. So we now have a comment message. We need to put volume message into this message. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to use what we did before, which is a string add. And so we put in message. We want to add our volume message into there and do that. So if we compile that and we go back to the MetaTrader, let the tick come through, because this runs every tick. You can see we get the current spread is 4, and then we get the numbers afterwards. Now, that's not very readable, so we're going to make a few changes to that. So we're going to come here and we're going to say string add, and we're going to add to the message string. So before we put in the volume message, we're going to add a new line using the n character constant. And we're going to say last 5 volumes, colon, with a space, and then we're going to put a new line in there, and we don't want a space between the new line and there because that will read funny. So we'll save that and compile. String add. There we go. So we forgot our semicolon, which is a common mistake. So we do that. So we've added another string in between to separate those out. If we go to MetaTrader now, you can see we've got our current spread, a new line, our last 5 volumes, a new line, and then we've got our 5 tick volumes being displayed on our chart. So we have even more information being displayed on our chart. In this lesson, in this part of the lesson, we've learned how to use for loops to populate a list, which we printed down here. We've then used a while loop to print that onto the screen so we can see that information and make informed trading decisions about it. So I hope you've enjoyed that episode and what we did in the MetaEditor, making our EA more interesting and giving us more useful information on our charts. The next episode is an exciting one. I know this is where people are going to be really interested because we're going to start to look at how we can use indicators, technical indicators, pre-built technical indicators in our expert advisor. We're going to look at how we can use inputs with those indicators to make our EA customizable, and we're going to change our EA to respond to the data from the indicator. So if you have any questions, drop it in the comment section below. I'm very active now on the comments, so drop it in. Let me know what you thought of the lesson. Otherwise, thank you for watching and have a good week. Bye.